Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to this month's installment of our HRS Speaker Series. My name is Rod Walton. I'm the Director of Outreach in the Learning Center here at Hamlin Robinson School, and I want to thank all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules this evening to join us. And I hope tonight's event really leaves you inspired and truly connected to the work and the support of our young folks. The mission of Hamlin Robinson School is to ignite the academic and creative potential of students with dyslexia and other language-based learning differences. The HRS Learning Center is the community outreach arm of our school, and we are a resource hub to our broader community, offering services such as tutoring, screening, professional development workshops, and events like this speaker series. If you have questions during the presentation, please send those through the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen. We'll make sure to share those out with our guest speakers after the main presentation. There will also be some opportunities for additional interaction throughout our talk tonight, and we ask that you engage through the Q&A bar when prompted, so make sure you use that option when you're asked. If you're a Washington State educator and you attend this full live event, you are eligible to register for clock hours. So please visit our speaker series homepage on our website for more information. We'll also share tonight's recording on our speaker series website. Hopefully, we'll post a link sometime before the holiday, and we encourage you to share this out to others who may benefit from tonight's information. When you are on that website, you'll also have access to recordings from our past events over the last 3 years, all downloadable and free of charge. Now on to our event. I am truly honored to introduce our keynote speakers for this evening, Brianna Berkowitz and Jasmin Vara of Connected Family Partners. Connected Family Partners are out of Austin, Texas, my home state, partners with families advocating for children, mental health, learning needs, and providing wraparound support to families and helping them meet their goals. The work is grounded in the power of connection and support in fostering a child's growth. Through building collaborative and trusting partnerships with families, Connected Family Partners is able to tailor their approach to meet the individual goals and needs of each family and each child. Recognizing that children are influenced by a variety of settings, their focus is really centered around partnering with a trusted network of people who support each child and their family, from the child's teacher to their pediatrician. Connected Family Partners combines expertise in coaching, educational consulting, neurodiversity, therapy, and psychoeducation to deepen understanding of how mental health, behavior, and learning differences intersect. Brianna and Jasmin are joining us live from the live music capital of the world, Austin, Texas. Welcome, guys. Thank you again for staying up late with us, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. We are so happy to be here. What an honor. Thank you, Rod. I'm Bree. You can call me Bree or Brianna. And I am one half of Connected Family Partners. Like Rod said, we're based in Austin. I wish I could say that either one of us was a musician, but we benefit from the many talented musicians all around us. Um, yeah, we are a private practice that offers parent coaching, child therapy, some educational consulting, and community education, which is what we love doing and what we're going to be doing tonight. I am a parent coach, and I work with clients here in our Austin office, as well as all over the country virtually. And I'll let Hasmin introduce herself.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I'm Jasmin Vara, and I am the child therapist, mental health therapist of CFP. And we're really thankful to HRS and to Rod for helping us to get this set up and for inviting us to connect with you all tonight. We'll get started. Maybe. Are we having tech difficulties?
I'm not seeing it advance to the next slide.
Hmm. Interesting. Okay, hold on. Give me a second here.
And maybe while Hasmin, oh, yeah, there we go. Oh,
There we go.
back. All right. Great. It is not a workshop from Connected Family Partners if there is not at least one technical glitch. So we are off to a strong start. Here we go. We can do it now. Okay. So big feelings, busy brains, helping kids and adults thrive when learning is hard. I'm going to say something that you already know, which is that Children with learning differences often face greater emotional demands at school and at home. If you're joining this workshop tonight, you already know that. And these challenges can leave the children more easily triggered, which can then in turn impact the adults who care for them. This presentation provides educators, parents, and caregivers with, we hope, a clear understanding of some of the brain science behind emotion dysregulation, um, and maybe more importantly, some practical strategies for managing the big feelings that can come up for all involved in these high intensity moments. It is our firm belief that the adults in a child's life are as deserving of the same type of thoughtful care and attention we strive to give our children. Um, I am a former classroom teacher and I cannot run a workshop without giving some learning objectives. So, um, goals, as my 11-year-old son would say, that's goals. So, our hope is that by the end of the presentation, we understand why kids with learning differences may have a harder time regulating their emotions. We're going to ask you to do some self-reflection. And so we're going to hopefully leave tonight understanding our own strengths and triggers. Um, we want to understand how to support a child who is dysregulated in the heat of the moment, um, and then how to problem solve and make a plan for the future.
So before we completely dive in, we wanted to start with some intentional mindful breathing. This is a great tool and strategy that we'll talk about later as well. But we know that it's a Thursday night before a holiday at that. You're probably wrapping up work or dinner or helping kids get ready for bed. And so we just wanted to take two intentional breaths together to kind of get us grounded in the present moment. So as the ball bounces up the steps, I encourage you to take a deep breath in, and then as it slides down the ramp, you can exhale. So we'll get going here with that. Okay, thank you for joining us in that. Um, so we want to begin by orienting ourselves to some data that we think helps to paint a picture of what many of us already know to be true, which is that many children with learning differences also have at least one other co-occurring condition. We're using this chart that happens to highlight ADHD as opposed to learning disabilities because it shows the relationship of co-occurring disorders.
Jasmin,
We,
I'm going to interrupt.
yes,
They can't see the screen. There it is.
hey,
Okay, great.
I wonder if I have to stay on that. Okay, so we want to direct your attention to the red bar, which shows learning disabilities, right? If we follow the key there. And so, really, what we want to highlight here is that there is a high co-occurrence there that is happening between different disorders. And a little caveat, right? We know that there are many ways of describing a learning difference, a disability, a disorder. We tend to lean into the language of difference because it allows us to take a strengths-based approach and to highlight all of the gifts that come with a difference and not just focusing on the difficulties and challenges. And so we want to share this because, you know, often when we view a child and their behaviors, we might want to immediately kind of label that behavior. And this is normal. This is such a typical reaction. It comes from a place of love and care, and as an educator, probably a place of wanting to support a family and a child during a difficult moment in a learning process. Um, the thing is that we're not diagnosticians, right? At least those of us in the classroom space, and maybe there are some diagnosticians in this parent community. That's wonderful. Thank you for the work that you do. But many of us are not, right? And so trying to label a behavior can actually be a little bit more harmful in the long run because then we're only looking at a behavior through a specific lens and not really trying to understand what the need is behind that behavior during a moment of dysregulation. So we just kind of wanted to start that, right, to set the stage for what we're really going to be diving into here next.
So this is why we love sharing this graphic. As you can see, this is a graphic of an iceberg. And with a true iceberg floating in the water, you can only see what is floating above the surface. But actually, often the bulk of the iceberg is below the water, kind of going undetected, right? You can't see what's below the water. Famously caused a bit of a problem for a ship called the Titanic. So we love this visual because we can apply this image, and it's a beautiful metaphor for thinking about our children. So in this graphic, you'll see the part floating above the water says reading and writing difficulties. And then there's a whole host of other things going on below the surface. And this visual reminds us that what we see from children, their behaviors, may be caused by a whole variety of underlying needs, such as the ones on this graphic, right? What we see may look like reading and writing difficulties, and that may be going on, but we can't see if there's anxiety at play or inattention or low self-esteem, right? We can't see that necessarily on the surface. And so this graphic reminds us not to make assumptions about what may be going on for a child. Um, Instead, it invites us to get really curious about what more may be contributing to the behaviors we can observe. So, for example, at home, you're sitting down to do homework with your child, and your child becomes dysregulated. In that moment, you might quickly jump to the conclusion, oh, yeah, well, it's the reading and the writing difficulty that they have. It's leading to their frustration. And that may be part of what's going on. Um, but we also don't know all the other parts that may be impacting their experience and what else may be at play. And it's helpful to try as hard as we can to stay in that place of curiosity. And we're going to come back to that a bit later.
Great. Can we see the next slide?
Not yet.
Hmm. How
Now we
about
can.
Okay, so we're switching gears here a little bit. The first couple of slides set the stage for why we're doing this. And now we really want to get into the meat and potatoes, or more specifically, the brisket, if you will, for those of you who are joining us from Texas. We're now transitioning to the science of what is happening in these moments of dysregulation and how to support children and yourself through them. Children with a learning difference are going to struggle more with emotion regulation because of the impact to certain brain structures and the development of these brain areas. We know that environmental influences affect our ability to manage our emotions. These influences, which can be stress and anxiety, that maybe come from the intensity of having to work harder than their peers to overcome an academic challenge because of a learning difference, makes it hard to manage our emotions. So, the stress and any other environmental factors that may be present for a child impairs the prefrontal functioning, which can make emotion regulation more effortful. So, really, this means that your child may be using all of their resources and strategies to manage their feelings while at school, which means that they're running on empty when they sit down to do their homework with you at home. Or if you're an educator, a student may have used all of their resources in a class before yours, which is leading to greater dysregulation in your class. So, not only is the prefrontal cortex, which plays an important role in managing emotions, being impacted by the stress of a learning difference and the experience that that student and child is having in the classroom, in the learning space. This part of the brain is also still developing in children. Let's remember that brains continue to develop until the age of 25, right? And so children are not going to be able to manage their emotions in the same way that we may be able to. So, really, there are two things at play here: the developing brain and the impact of stress and anxiety on the brain that will make it more difficult for a child with a learning difference to manage their emotions. Um, the intersectionality of this could also have an effect on the adults supporting a child through this moment of dysregulation, right? Because it's natural. We're going to also have some big feelings maybe come up when we see a child who is struggling or kind of pushing our buttons, right? And that at the end of the night when you're trying to keep going through your routine.
Great. Okay. So now we switch to the interactive part of the evening. And first and foremost, we're going to ask you to interact a little bit with yourselves and your peers here. So we're going to need you to use that chat feature. Um, and in a moment, you're going to be entering entering something there. So know that that's coming. Um, so we often talk in our practice about taking a strengths-based approach, and we know this is extremely important when we're talking about children with learning differences because often their experience in the world can feel as though their deficits are being highlighted rather than their strengths, right? We know there's lots of data around kind of the number of corrections and redirections that children with learning differences receive versus neurotypical children. And so we talk a lot about a strengths-based approach for children. We apply that same thinking to the adults in the child's life. We really believe that we all bring unique strengths to parenting or teaching, or whatever it is you're out there doing with kids. Um, and as we think about some of the challenges that come up in raising kids with learning differences, we want to first name our own strengths that we bring to the table. Identifying those areas of strength in ourselves reminds us of how capable and well equipped to the challenge of raising or teaching the children in our care we truly are. Um, and so right now, we want everyone to go ahead and enter into the chat one or two strengths you bring to parenting or teaching.
You'll use your Q&A bar, folks, for
Yeah,
that
thank you.
interaction.
I'm calling to chat.
Yeah,
Q&A.
yeah.
Chat is disabled. Okay, great. Got it.
And Brie, I'll let you read some of those if you want,
Okay,
so that I don't want to mess up the tech setup.
great. Um, so we have uh, inquiry. I love that one. Perspective, patience, a great understanding of his emotions, empathy, research, and advocacy. Amazing. Hard worker, empathy, emotional intuition, routine. Ooh, yes, ability to pivot in challenging situations. We're going to talk about that later. Being able to be silly. I'm so glad someone said that. Humor is so important. It's such a tool. Advocacy, giving space for him to breathe, love, yeah, calm, curious, trying to see things from his point of view. Okay, I'm going to read like three more. These are so good. Authenticity, understanding, care. Thank you all so much. Those are such beautiful answers. Um, yeah. So we bring a lot, right? We bring a lot to this work. And it's really helpful to call on our strengths. And we're gonna talk a little bit about yeah, how we might use that moving forward.
Yeah, so now we're really gonna imagine ourselves in that moment where your child or your student is having a big feeling, and now you, the adult, are also having a big feeling, right? It happens. This is so hard. Supporting a child in a big moment of dysregulation can cause us to dysregulate. That's okay. Um, as we continue on this slide, we want to pause and also ask you to join us in the vulnerability of sharing some of your triggers or truly reflecting at home or wherever you are on what your triggers may be. We'll start by sharing some personal ones. I will share a story about a session that I had with a client. I don't know how many of you may be familiar with the Loom bracelets. There's a little bit of a visual there on the slide for you. For those of you who have ever engaged in making a Loom bracelet with a child, you know that it's just a lot of tiny rubber bands, different colors, right? And you get to make patterns and whatnot. Well, I have one of those in my office and took a lot of pride in having all of the rubber bands separated by color. A client and I were working on this together, and they reached their frustration tolerance and started to have some big feelings. And this kiddo just picked up the containers that the rubber bands were in and dumped them. And I know that I must have had a very visible response to that. As much as I thought that I was like, oof, I'm cool. I got this. It's under control. Because the moment we made eye contact, they just mixed them all up, right? Um, and I know that I was feeling a little bit of a heart racing, right? Beating a little bit faster. I had this immediate urge to want to just say, like, we're done. We're not doing this anymore. I'm going to pick up all of the rubber bands. And instead, I reached for my water bottle and tried to take a moment to regulate myself so that I could be there present for the child who was also having a big feeling and a big moment. I'll dive into some more specifics of that in just a little bit, but I'll let Bree also share an example.
Yeah. Um, I love that story, Jasmin. Um, I'm a mom. I have three kids. And my middle son has some sensory sensitivities, and he's 8, and we've made huge strides. Um, and partially because I understand him better than I once did. And there was a fancy dress up day at school recently, which for a kid with sensory sensitivity is a nightmare. And we picked out his outfit, and he was feeling good about it, and he was ready to go. And the morning arrives, and he gets picked up by another parent to get to school in a carpool. And about 3 minutes before the carpool's meant to come, he says he doesn't want to wear the shirt and he doesn't want to wear the socks. And I immediately had a narrative enter my mind, which was a lot of swear words. And then, like, I've failed, like I tried so hard to get out the door smoothly. And man, I can't figure it out, right? And like here I am literally this week prepping this webinar, right? Um, and he made it out to school and he got in the carpool wearing an outfit, and it was fine. But my immediate instinct was like real anger both at him and at myself.
Thank you, Bree. I know those are hard moments, especially in the morning, right when you're like, we all have to get going. The toughest time of the day for us all. But what do we do in these big feeling moments as the adult? The first step is to notice and identify your triggers. As they say, you've got to name it to tame it, right? So, um, how do you know that this is a trigger for you? What are your body clues? And this is language that we use with kids a lot, right? What are the things that are happening in your body? What do you notice? Is it uh, warm, flushed cheeks? Is it your shoulders tensing and rising to your ears, right? Is it that um, fast heartbeat. Um, there's so many ways that our body lets us know that we're having a response and a reaction to something. Um, and then how do you take care of yourself and your feelings in that moment? Some suggestions that we recommend are to model needing to take a break and deep breaths. So you can say something like, I'm feeling really frustrated right now. I'm going to grab a drink of water and then I'll come back and we can try again. Right. So I knew in my example that I needed to take a couple sips that was going to let me kind of like collect myself, right, to take care of what I needed so I could be present for the child who I was working with. Um, we also love the idea of tag teaming. If there is another adult available, how can you support each other in these moments of dysregulation? Or if you know, for example, that you're also triggered by the math homework that your child brings home every night because it's hard for you, then maybe your partner or another adult takes on homework help for that subject. Or you reach out to a teacher to proactively make a plan for your kiddo to stay at an after school group for math support, right? It takes a village. We're all working together, and it's okay to ask for help. Um, Along the same lines, right, as if you're tagging out with another adult, it can be helpful to have a nonverbal cue for your partner so that they know, okay, this is where we make a little swap, right? I've got to go in and help in this situation. Or you have a code word that you've both agreed on and that you know means, okay, we need to support each other in this moment. We also encourage you to create a new story. So identify that you're having a response and ask yourself what the narrative is that is contributing to that feeling that you're having. Then, the important part here is to reframe it in a way that allows you to have more understanding or empathy for your child's experience in that moment, right? This is the time to remind ourselves that kids are doing the best they can. And we know that children with learning differences are going to struggle more with emotion regulation, right? They're still developing those skills. And so remember that there is more to that iceberg than what we see floating in the water. Um, and if you do have a big response, you're human. Welcome to the club. It is okay. And the important part is to engage in reparations. Reparations do not have to happen and actually probably should not happen in the moment that everyone is having that big feeling, especially if like you're now calm and collected, but your child still is not. Let's not engage in that right then. You can come back to them the next day or later that evening if there's still time to do some of that work. It can be helpful to use and model an I statement. The sentence stem for that is I feel blank when blank. I wish, I want, I need blank. So if I were to use an I statement for the example that I gave earlier, I might say, I feel frustrated when things are not organized neatly by color. I wish that we could keep all of the rubber bands in their individual containers in the future. In doing so, we're not using the word you, right? Which can feel really accusatory. And the person who's hearing how you are feeling or processing this event with you might feel a little bit defensive. Instead, an I statement really encourages us to focus on a solution, right? It is solution oriented, not so much naming like this was a problem, here's how we mishandled it. Um, a final note on reparations is that if you, the adult, are the one who is doing the repairing, it is not the child's job to then take care of your feelings during this process. So you can also say something like, you don't need to say anything back. I wanted to share how I was feeling and then kind of move on from there. Um, all right.
Think we're going to invite folks to write in the Q&A here their triggers. So if you have a trigger that you're feeling ready to share, write it down. All right, and I can read them out. Constant loud sounds, yelling, fighting, etc. Me too. When the attack becomes personal, running late, swearing at me and calling me names, refusing food offered. Yeah. when a child is sad and I urgently want to fix it, when I try to do the right thing and then I'm not appreciated, um, ignoring me, when my 8-year-old is dysregulated and then my 5-year-old joins in, loud crying and yelling. Yeah, so many of it's such a human reaction, right, to the loud sound, loud noise, defiance, yelling, ignoring, silent treatment. All right, so
Can I
um,
note on that, Bree?
yes, please.
What a great reminder too. Thank you for sharing, right, that you're not alone in these experiences. And we don't often talk about maybe what those moments of dysregulation look like at home, especially if your friends or your family have neurotypical children, right? They may not always understand that these moments are bigger and that your experience is different for you and your family in your home. So thank you for sharing those with us. Um, okay. So as we move along here, oh, did it go back? It went forward one too many times. Here we go. It's really not our friend today, but we're gonna make it work. Um,
Yeah, I
okay.
think you got it. We're aligned here. Okay.
Okay.
Um, so thank you for sharing those triggers. That was really vulnerable, right? And again, we are not alone. We are in this together, whether we are parents or educators or therapists working with kids. It is helpful for me, and I think for many of us, to remember that the big feelings we experience are rooted in brain science, and specifically parts of the brain, as has been said earlier, that are still developing in our kids, right? So first, let's consider what a regulated state looks like at the brain level. A regulated state is when all the parts of our brain are working together to meet our needs. Diving a little deeper into this, this is that interconnection um, between the amygdala, which is the emotion center of our brain, and you can see it in this diagram, and the prefrontal cortex, which is the part of our brain kind of behind our forehead. Um, and when we have a strong emotional response or are kind of emotionally triggered, the amygdala can sort of take over or hijack those neural pathways. So there's no longer connection between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. They're not working together anymore. That's that dysregulated state. The amygdala has taken control, and they're really not working in concert to achieve whatever goal we have as the individual. And a huge part of that prefrontal cortex regulates emotion, right? So that we can really see that is, what a tantrum in a young child is that kind of disconnection between those two parts of the brain. And that strong connection is essential for healthy emotional regulation, decision making, learning, which is why we don't problem solve or reason with a child during these heightened moments, right? That is not the time where we're trying to solve the problem. Um, and if you're a parent or an educator, you definitely have tried to solve a problem with a child while they're in this state because it is so hard to resist. And it's kind of counterintuitive. So we all do it. We all end up in it at some point, and it's okay, but it's helpful to catch yourself and notice that. Um, we love the the hand model of the brain that Dan Siegel has provided. And for many of you, this may be review, but he talks about, Dan Siegel is a psychologist who studies child development and the brain. He talks about our hand as a metaphor for the brain. And so your thumb would be like the amygdala. So the thumb is right here. And then the prefrontal cortex are my other four fingers. And in a regulated state, the prefrontal cortex is connected to my thumb or my amygdala, right? and everything is working together to help me achieve my goals and I'm feeling good. Um, when I am triggered, emotionally triggered, I lose the connection between my amygdala and my prefrontal cortex, and we call that flipping our lid. And this is a great thing if you have seen this and forgotten about it. This is a good reminder. If this is new to you, this is such a good tool to have for ourselves and also to teach our kids um, a little bit about the science of dysregulation. It really is helpful. Um, and so what we'll get into in the next slides are kind of what do we do when we get to that flip lid place? How do we close back down the prefrontal cortex so that our brain is working together, the parts of our brain are working together to serve us?
Exactly. Um, how do we get to that regulated state again, right? Um, we can begin with co-regulation. And we want to kind of reflect here on what co-regulation is and is not. We like to define co-regulation as being present in the moment. We are not trying to problem solve with a child, right, in that dysregulated state, or to remove the stressor for them. That's also not helpful. To us, co-regulation is less about the words, and we truly believe that it happens with our bodies and our nonverbal cues. Um, we get to become the nervous system for our children in those moments because of mirror neurons. So, the science there, right, is that if someone is watching you, um, try to regulate, they will enter that same regulated state, even if they don't fully join you in whatever strategy you're using to get to that calm place. So you modeling it has so much power for your child in helping them to get through this really difficult big feeling moment. Um, Distraction. Yeah, we absolutely lean into this when we need to. So distraction allows us to shift our focus from the stressor to something lighter. You know your child best, what brings them joy, what are their interests, and how can you use those in the moment when they're having a really big feeling. I can think back to a time when I was in a classroom, when I was working in a school, when a child was very dysregulated, and I tried co-regulating. I tried several strategies and just did not have the success that I was hoping for. And so I remember just sitting there and looking around the room, and I noticed, don't ask me why, I still don't know why this was in this classroom, but I noticed like an alligator head that was sticking out of the closet in the classroom. And I knew that this kiddo loved all things animal related and really thought that this could be a tool that we could use. So I noticed the alligator head and said, huh, I wonder how many teeth that alligator has. And that allowed the child to physically shift focus, right? They turned their body, their head to look for the alligator head and then engaged in that, right? And they were like, oh my gosh, I think we can count them. Or did you? I think he probably actually gave me a fact about alligators that I did not know. And so some of us as adults may feel like, well, we're not addressing the feeling or the stressor in this moment. And that is okay. We can circle back to that later when everyone is in a state of calm and has access to their prefrontal cortex again. Another strategy is a grounding exercise. You may be familiar with the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method, where you notice 5 things that you see, 4 things that you hear, 3 things that you can touch, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste. That can be difficult for children and myself sometimes to remember, right? And so instead, try the rainbow grounding exercise, where a child looks around the room that they are in or the space that they're in and identify something that is red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, so that they can really focus on the present moment. Um, you might notice how that can also feel like distraction, right? We're shifting our thoughts from really what is creating the stress and that big feeling, and allowing us to regulate. Cold water is another helpful strategy. It helps to activate our polyvagal nervous system to reduce stress and anxiety so that our bodies return to a state of rest and calm. You can do this by sipping on cold water, or better yet, you can run your hands through some cold water, right? Maybe the strategy that you teach your kiddo is to wash their hands in these moments of big feelings. Or you can apply a cool, wet rag to the back of your neck. Um, for those who need more of a physical release, encourage them to put their backs against the wall, literally, um, or to do a wall push-up or to carry something heavy from one end of the room to another. This will help to fill that sensory need that their body may be seeking in that moment. Um, and then lastly, time and space. If all else fails, be present with your child in silence. Let them know that you'll be there waiting for them when they're ready to talk or move forward, by saying, I know this is a really hard moment. I'm going to be here, waiting for you to let me know when you're ready again. And then truly stay in that silence. And maybe you have your phone, you can doom scroll for those 5 minutes that your child is needing to take for themselves. Um, all of these strategies are great for adults and kids alike, and they're fluid. So if something that works for you right now, today, doesn't work for you tomorrow, switch it up, right? Try a new strategy. That's okay. Often we will find different strategies at different phases of our lives that feel most effective and helpful.
Okay, we're coming to the end of the road here, folks. So we've gotten through the heat of the moment, right? And um, we've talked a little bit about how we might manage that, right? And understanding at the brain level what's going on for our kids and ourselves and what strategies we, might employ to kind of get to the other side of that really intense dysregulated moment. Um, Now we're talking about kind of what do we do outside of that moment, right? So not in the heat of the moment. Maybe it's the next day or 3 days later. Um, because a lot of the work we can do as parents and educators is preventative, right? And responsive. And it happens during regulated moments. And so the first thing we want to think about doing is becoming the detectives, right? So how can we really start to notice and really get curious about what's going on for our children or our students? This is calling back that iceberg, right? How can we figure out what's going on below that surface that we couldn't see? And so we're starting to look for patterns, right? We can start to notice um, and maybe even make a mental note or an actual true physical note. Okay, what is the trigger? Wow, I notice every time my kid sits down to do math homework, 10 minutes later, they're in a dysregulated state and their lid is flipped. Um, First, we want to notice kind of those body clues, right? What were the clues that led up to that dysregulation? Can I go back in my mind? Can I conjure up anything that was a clue that they were headed in that direction? Were they pressing really hard on their pencil? Was their tone of voice, did it become really whiny? Did they start speaking really fast? Were they really fidgety? They just couldn't sit still, right? Facial expressions, the words they were choosing to use, right? I can't do this, maybe is what they were saying. Staring off into space. What can we start to notice that will tell us, oh, they've actually started to become dysregulated. Um, they're on the path to dysregulation. It is so helpful to notice that because we can later intervene and communicate that to them, right? Oh, I'm starting to see that this is happening for you. We also want to notice time of day, the subject or activity they're working on. Who is around? Does this only happen when they're doing homework with one parent? Does this only happen if the sibling is around? Does it only happen if they went to PE that day and they hate PE, right? What are the things that can clue us into what could be going on? Um, and so now we're doing that work of thinking about what's underneath the water on the iceberg and what are the things we can't see. And as we notice those clues, we can share them with our children, right? I notice that every time we sit down to do your homework, you start to use this tone of voice, right? I'm starting to see this pattern. Um, do you notice that? Yeah. Can you feel that? Yeah. Right. And you're bringing them into this conversation. Um, all of this is important in kind of coming up with a co-created solution or plan with your child. And the last thing I'll say just on this is that what I describe this kind of detailed focus and attention and kind of data gathering on our kids is really hard to do. And especially for our classroom teachers who are at the front of the classroom managing a group of kids, it's really, really hard to get this type of information. And so this might be a time to invite a colleague in and say, hey, can you take some notes? I'm really trying to figure out what's going on with this kid, right? I can't see it because I'm managing 25 other people. Um, Same co-parents, right? Like, or another adult, right? Invite someone in to help you.
Um, as Bree said, um, all of that leads us to this final step here of reflection and collaboration with the child in your life. So invite the child to problem solve with you. You can say, hey, I've noticed that when we do this, it feels really hard, or we have some really big feelings. What do you think about that? What do you think might be happening? Um, and allow them to share their thoughts and ideas, right? They may be able to give us information that we would not have known otherwise without this conversation. It's a great time to engage in this when everybody is calm and regulated. So maybe for some of you that's in the car, maybe for some it's after dinner. You know your family best. Figure out when is the right time to have this conversation. As you continue talking with them about this, co-create a structure or system that can be implemented with them. So say, wow, okay, yes, you're noticing this. Here's what I'm noticing. What can we do differently in the future? How can we make this easier next time? And your child may provide some suggestions that you're like, oh my gosh, no, actually, that's probably going to make everything worse. But write it down, right? They're engaging in this with you. Their voice matters as well. Take notes on what they're saying and suggesting as well. And then pick one or two. And we encourage you to truly try that for a week or 2 weeks if you can, right? Really, really put in some effort there to follow through on the plan. If it doesn't work, guess what? You can go back to that sheet that you co-created and pick another strategy or another solution that may work and try that again for a week until you find the magic sauce that works for your family. Um, as you're trying these strategies, it's really important to provide some positive reinforcement. So make note out loud with them in the progress that you're seeing, right? Oh, I can tell that you really tried to reach for that cold water, or I noticed that you took some sips. That was so helpful, right? Even if it didn't quite help to the level that we wanted to. That's okay. We want to acknowledge their efforts and celebrate those with them. And then, as we said earlier, embrace the art of the pivot, right? Keep going back to that sheet that you've created, to those solutions and the strategies that you've come up with, and um, pick a new one and know that it's okay if something didn't work as well as we would have liked to initially. There are other solutions out there for your family, and you'll find the right one.
Thank you so much, both of you for just really helping us to start to think about ways that we can interact and support our children, our students, um, in this process. And one thing that really stuck out for me was really taking a look at ourselves and how we could sometimes be a trigger and how are we entering the space. And I loved how you said in the beginning of our talk that, our students are in class all day. They're in highly charged environments, and when school is hard, they're using all of their brain power and emotion to get through the day, to just get through to the next class, the next assignment, and dealing with the challenge of a learning difference and all that that brings. And they come home emotionally drained and still have to give more effort to homework. Vice versa on our end, as adults, we're doing that in our professions. We're doing that and giving that brain power and energy and emotion to what we have to come to the day. And it's a clash of two worlds at the end of the day. And how can we co-collaborate to create a safe space for both of us where we're acknowledging that we're both have triggers, or we're both can be a challenge for each other in those highly charged emotional moments, and how can we co-create a positive solution together, give students a stake in their own experience. And I think a lot of times when we talk about young folks and young adults, they're often just being told, right? It's often, sometimes it's like, you're not doing this or you should be doing this. And it's more of, what do you think you should be doing, or how do you think you should approach? And now the responsibility and accountability is there on them to be able to create a space for themselves that they have ownership and intentionality to see through, because it's a goal that they set for themselves, or something they want to do for themselves, and there's autonomy there. So I really appreciate that. Let's keep the conversation going real, as we're starting to close in, but I want to let folks know you can start using the chat, sorry, the chat, but the Q&A option on your screen to ask any follow-up questions from anything that we've discussed in this talk today with Bree and Hasmin.
Hmm.
No questions?
No, I see one. I see a
Oh,
really good one. I'm reading it. It's
okay. There you go.
do you consider, I love this question, a teen expressing gentle tears and soft sadness and saying they're overwhelmed as dysregulated or lid flipped? Should I wait for tears to be gone before I problem solve or emotion coach with them?
Mm.
What a beautiful, sensitive question. Um, my first thought on that is they're in a heightened emotional state, maybe their lid's like this, it's like about to go all the way. I don't know. But I think the way to enter in, and especially with teens, gosh, we love teens and parents of teens, and how we enter in really matters in those moments. And I think the first step is that co-regulation piece, right? Um, hey, I
And
see you.
And I think that if they're sharing that feeling of overwhelm, right? What a wonderful and special invitation that we don't always get from teens, right? For that connection with you. And so validating and keeping your relationship um, strong and safe and healthy with them is going to be a great tool, not just for that moment, but for future difficult moments that they may experience.
And I would just add with teenagers, they can really communicate. A lot of them can communicate kind of what they're wanting in that moment. And so you can ask them, hey, do you want me to just sit next to you? Um, I have some thoughts. Let me know when you'd like to hear them or if you'd like to hear them.
Hmm. Someone asked, when the noticing leads to heightened frustration, do you have any ideas for how else to approach the kiddo for cooperative planning?
Mm.
It's a good question.
So, like when we share our observations with them, and if that leads to big feelings, yeah, oh, that is so tricky. Um, I think this is where we say that, like, as the adult, we were also having a really big feeling, right? And we get vulnerable with our kids as well and say, listen. this is why I said, I'm feeling really frustrated right now. Here's what I need to do. Here's what I notice in my body, right? When I get mad, when I get angry, here's what happens for me. These are my body clues. And the best tool I often share with parents is like, a little bit tedious, but like if you act like your life, like you're narrating your life like on a sitcom, right? And any moment and opportunity, take advantage of any moment or opportunity that you have where you can model and practice some of that language and those tools and skills will be really helpful. So even if it's not in this moment with your child, but you're making dinner and you're like, oh my gosh, I forgot to buy the green beans, or actually the green beans that we have are no good anymore. Ugh, I'm feeling really upset about that. I had this plan, it didn't work out the way I wanted to. Narrate that out loud if your child is around so that they can hear it, and then follow through with that, right? To say, okay, I'm going to take a couple deep breaths so I can think of a solution for this problem. I'm going to drink some water. I'm going to walk away from the kitchen for a little bit, and then I'll come back to figure out what we can substitute for the green beans for tonight's dinner. So that's one way of kind of building that in, and that the comfort of naming our feelings and talking about our feelings, because often the problem there, right, when we start to share observations, is that it is really uncomfortable to say, "Oh, here's the feeling that I was having," right? It's really hard for a child sometimes to also say, "I'm actually really mad at you," right? You made the problem worse. And so um practicing that in all the moments of our life can build comfort and safety, and doing that in those stickier moments.
Great. Someone asked, at home, our 6-year-old girl has very few issues with dysregulation, but at school it seems to be getting more intense. What strategies can we employ to help her in those hard moments at school?
Yeah, I love this. And we see this, right? That for whatever reason, kids are more or less dysregulated in certain environments. Sometimes it's the other way around, where they hold it together at school and kind of down-regulate at home. Um, I would really recommend partnering with her teachers to um, do some of what we just talked about, right? They're the detectives, right? We're trying to understand kind of what the triggers are, and letting them know that you're really open and interested in hearing how to partner with them can go a really long way. Hasbeen and I both used to work in schools. And I think when a parent comes and says, I really want to partner with you, how can I support my kid, right? That can lead to something really powerful. Um, so I would want, it's hard to answer because I want so much more information, right? I think we want to understand what is happening with this dysregulation. And I would notice things like time of day, subject, um, you what else has mean?
Well, I'm also thinking, right, you can bring that conversation home. We know that for educators, the days are so filled and they may not have the opportunity to have some of the conversations that we talked about today, right? And so you can engage in that conversation at home with your child and say, hey, we've heard that it's been really hard at school to be in control of our feelings. You're so good at doing that here at home. I actually want to give you a compliment, right? At home, you are in control of your feelings a lot. And when you have a big feeling, you know how to control them. What are the strategies? What are the tools? What are the things that help you here at home? How is doing that at home different than it is at school? And really help them kind of identify what those differences may be, to feel confident that they can do this at school as well, and that they do have strategies in them already that they're using. Um, and then partner with your child to also partner with their teacher, right? How can we share these tools and strategies with your teacher? Do you want mom to share those? Do you want to share those? If they want to share them, great. I would say let them do that 100%. And then maybe you follow up with the teacher as well to make sure everything was communicated correctly. Um, but give them that voice. It's such a great opportunity for them to learn how to advocate for themselves in different settings when you may not be around.
Great. And our final question for the evening is, I feel like we have failed on emotion coaching. Our fourth grader isn't good at talking about how she feels. She's more likely to run to her room and hide instead of talking. Do you have any recommendations on how to best handle the scenario at this age?
I'll start, and I know we're both going to have things we want to say on this. The first is you have not failed at all, and running to your room is a way of being kind of dysregulated, and that's okay, right? That's that flight mode that some people get into, and it's okay, right? That is a totally appropriate human reaction to feeling a strong emotion. Um, I think that sharing with her, is it yeah, with her about what you're observing, um, and getting curious. When is this happening? And um, noticing kind of what leads to that triggered moment, which for her looks like running away and getting some space. And then also meeting her where she is. I think that not all kids are ready to talk about their feelings, right? And that's okay. Finding sometimes kids are more open to talk when they're playing a game or riding in the back seat of the car and you're in the front and they can avoid eye contact, right? But I think honoring where your child is and starting there um, is a great place to start. What else has mean?
I want to first of all echo what you said, right? You've not failed. Oh my gosh, not at all. Um, Emotion identification is one of the most difficult things, which is why I think feeling wheels exist, not just in child therapy spaces, but adult therapy spaces, right? Because we don't often have the language, have the words, are used to naming a feeling, right? Especially really identifying a specific feeling beyond just anger, happiness, joy, sadness, digging a little bit deeper. And so my mind here went in a couple of different directions. One is that I'm thinking fourth grade. We're also entering a different developmental stage there, right? Puberty potentially. We're seeing some of that, and so wanting that space is typical, right? That can be normal. Um, I might say, I know that you're having some really big feelings. It's okay if you don't want to talk with me about them. But we also know that naming our feelings and letting those out is really important. I often give children the metaphor that our bodies are a little bit like a volcano. And there are going to be lots of moments throughout the day that make us have a feeling, a reaction. Um, the more we push them down, it's kind of like lava. It's going to just kind of bubble in there until one day something happens and we erupt, right? And so we have a bigger reaction to something than we thought we should have, or we are also kind of thrown off by our reaction, like, whoa, wait, where did that come from? That wasn't even that big of a problem. Um, and so letting it out is really important so that we avoid those situations. And so maybe they'd prefer to journal, and they can have a journal that they keep in their room to process those feelings and to name those feelings. And then, as we were saying earlier, a lot of um, the discomfort with that is just not being used to really naming and identifying feelings for ourselves. And so creating safety around that at home by narrating when you're having moments of dysregulation or big feelings can be helpful. And again, that can be any feeling, right? It doesn't just have to be anger or sadness. It can be the joy, it can be jealousy, it can be excitement, anything that you're feeling, feel free to just you know, name that for yourself, say it out loud so that you're building that safety within your home, and for your child to be able to identify those for themselves as well.
Can I just add one more thought that I had as you were talking, Hasmin, is that you can use this as something you kind of create a plan around with your child at a regulated moment. And maybe one of the tools you offer your child is, an emotion wheel that includes the emotions. You could also use it just a thumbs up, thumbs down, right? Some kind of nonverbal cue or signal might be where they are right now. And you start there, and then you eventually get to have a 25-year-old who has a robust emotional vocabulary. But good news is you have a lot of years in between now and then.
I was one final thought on that. Um, yes, okay. The when you said the thumbs up, thumbs down, I used to use language, but I don't know if you remember of the thermometer, right? Like everybody
Mhm.
has a thermometer. It gauges how we're feeling inside, and it has such a range as well. And I was also reminded that sometimes verbally expressing how we feel um, can be the obstacle there in that moment. And so maybe having a piece of paper that you're sliding back and forth with your questions or prompts can be helpful. I have seen children open up in that way with a whiteboard or a sheet of paper where I ask a question. They can't use their words. The language just is not there in that moment, but they can write about it. And that's a win too.
Great. Thank you both so much for giving us those insights. And it's very challenging when the emotions are involved because everyone's fully invested. There's love involved, there's stress involved, there's all of those factors that make us who we are and how we bring those emotions and experiences to a space is it's very critical how we interact and how we navigate through those together. And the key part of that is that we do it together and that our young people understand that even through the ups and downs and the challenges, that they are supported, whether that's in the classroom or that's at home, that the intention is still the same, is to support them to have and help them navigate those spaces, and us too. It's a learning journey that we're navigating ourselves as adults. And I'm glad that there are organizations like you and folks who are in this space, whether you're an educator or a therapist or just a parent involved in this process that keep going. Every day is a different day. It's going to present its challenges. It's going to present the victories too. I mean, there and the small victories count. Those small wins are a lot for students, and when we're affirming them and working through that together and verbalizing some of those challenges ourselves, and we model that behavior, they're going to model that at home and they're going to model that at school too. And they'll be influencing others in their classroom to do it too. And hopefully it'll create a chain reaction and help our teachers being able to manage those large classrooms. So, we'll hopefully we can emotionally pay it forward. But thank you, Jasmin and Bree, so much for this talk tonight, for staying up late with us and giving us these beautiful insights. And if you have any additional questions about tonight's talk or anything comes up in your mind in the next couple of days, please reach out to outreach@hamlinrobinson.org. With your additional questions, I'll make sure to get those over to Jasmin and Bree. We'll have the video up hopefully before Thanksgiving. If that does not happen, which I highly doubt, we'll have it up the following Monday, December 1st. I can't believe we're already at the end of the year. But with that being said, thank you all for staying up late with us tonight. And for everyone in the audience, thank you for joining this HRS Speaker Series event, and we'll see you next month. Have a good night.